California outrage there right now over the response to a police shooting incident. Prosecutors in California, in Paradise, California, say they will not charge an officer who fired a man in a wrecked SUV. Let me just warn you that the dash cam, this video is graphic. Here's what we know. According to the DA's report, Officer Patrick Feaster started following 26-year-old Andrew Thomas after he sped out of a parking lot with his headlights off.
Copy, roll over TC.
Now, the DA's report states Thomas flipped his car, as you can see here. Wife was actually ejected. She died later. And here you see the officer, wait for him in the right hand, pulling out his gun, and down Thomas goes back through the window. Now, the DA's statement says that this officer fired one shot. The report indicates Thomas was hit in his spine. Goes on to say that this officer didn't report the shooting for 11 minutes after the man who was in the car was taken from the scene. Now, Officer Feaster says his gun accidentally discharged. The DA's office called the shooting, quote, possibly negligent, but not criminal. I repeat, not criminal. As for the driver, the police report indicates Thomas had a blood alcohol level nearly twice the legal limit. He is still in the hospital. He could face vehicular manslaughter charges in the death of his wife. Now, this police officer is on paid administrative leave until the internal investigation is complete. So a lot of parts to walk through here. I have with me Charles Coleman Jr., former prosecutor and civil rights attorney, and Steve Rogers, retired detective, lieutenant detective, correct me, with the Nutley, New Jersey Police Department and a former member of the FBI Joint Terrorism Task Force. So great to see both of you. And I guess my first question is, from an officer perspective, obviously he sees this car. It appears to be erratically driving. The car flips. You walk upon this car, and the instinct apparently is to pull the gun and shoot.
Well, the instinct is to pull the gun, but not shoot. Here's the point. He was justified in drawing his weapon. He didn't know what was coming out of that vehicle. But to shoot, you don't shoot people like that. When you look at the video, the guy has his hand up in the air. There was no imminent threat of life to the officer or anyone else. Well, he says it was an accident, but look, we can't get in his mind, but I'm troubled over the fact that after the weapon was fired, there was not immediately over the radio, which, by the way, is procedure. Shots fired, send us some help.
He only repeats, or apparently
11 seconds later.
Minutes.
I'm sorry, 11 minutes later. And that's a little troublesome. If it was, look, you can't prove intent, but the fact of the matter is that it shouldn't have come down that way. It shouldn't have come down that way.
The district attorney says that he will not face criminal charges, again, at the gun accidentally discharged.
Right, so there are two things that you have to look at when you're talking about why this district attorney is not going to charge the officer involved. Well, the first one is intent, and as we've just heard, a large part of it is a matter of you can't be in this officer's head and you can't make a determination as to whether there was a willful and intentional firing of that weapon. Now, while it may seem just egregious to the common eye, the way that California law is written requires that absent a death, which we don't have in this case, that prosecutor would need to be able to establish that that trigger was pulled willfully and intentionally and with a conscious effort by Officer Feaster. He can't make that out, which is why he's chosen not to prosecute in this case.
If you're an officer and you're walking upon, you see an erratic car, you think, okay, this could be a drunk driver. Apparently this officer has been, really applauded by Mothers Against Drunk Driving for all the drunk driving arrests he's made. How does that change how you perceive the situation upon which you're walking?
Well, Brooke, I've been on throughout my career on many incidents like this. And look, my gun at times was drawn. People are getting out of their cars. You really don't know if they're drunk until after you test them. I mean, it could have been a mentally ill person, could have been any number of things. But the point is this, you don't draw your gun to kill someone.
Why would you draw your gun, period? Because
well,
the person
to protect
may flee?
yourself. Yeah, you don't know what's coming out of that vehicle, so that's fine.
Okay.
But you always have to have your weapon under your control. Now, had that individual had a weapon in his hand, that we wouldn't be sitting here today discussing this.
Right.
But the fact of the matter is, on the face of what we see, I understand, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that the officer radioed in that the guy wasn't cooperating after he shot him. Well, that's a problem, all right? I see the guy cooperating. I see the guy coming out of this vehicle. Then there was another issue. The guy was fleeing. That was another report.
That was a concern, according to the officer.
Well, how do you know? The guy is coming out, hands up.
Right.
I mean, you could see that. That's not a fleeing felon.
To you, back on the DA though, shock and confusion are the words that we're hearing here, leading this officer to respond the way he did. Is that satisfactory?
I think it's not satisfactory.
Shock and confusion.
And I do think that it really does raise some questions.
His wife had just been flung out of this car. She dies.
Right. And I also think it raises some interesting question as to mindset. So on one hand, you're talking about shock and confusion being the mindset of the officer and what is taking place. But then on the other hand, you're saying that you're not able to improve intent. So both of those sort of reflect the mindset. And it's kind of curious to me that he's able to comment about one mindset with respect to shock and confusion. But then with respect to the willful discharge of this weapon, he's saying, well, we can't prove that beyond a reasonable doubt. We have nothing and we're not able to prosecute. So those things kind of sort of don't jive and reconcile with each other very well, which sort of struck as being very odd to me when I listened to the prosecutor and read his report.
Brooke, you and I on prior broadcasts when we had viewed incidents like this used one word. It all boiled down to training. I would be very interested to see what training procedures, what active shooter training, what type of incidents in training that these officers go through, because training has a lot to do with this. Look, the officer, we got to take him at his word. I think maybe the guy got frightened and for some reason the weapon fired, but
then why not report it for 11 minutes?
I was just going to say that. I've learned one thing by all the police supervisors I've had. Tell the truth. You know, if you foul up, you foul up, but always tell the truth.
And that's where I think discipline comes into the conversation, because in order for law enforcement to understand that these sort of actions will not be tolerated, and by actions I'm referring specifically to the fact that what we see on the dash cam does not add up to what is told in these reports, discipline has to come into effect, where officers know and law enforcement knows that they have to tell the truth or be held accountable.
We saw the video, it struck us, wanted to have the conversation again, no criminal charges filed. Charles Coleman Jr. and Steve Rogers, thank you both so much.
Thanks, Brooke.